You've been lied to. Not in a scammy Nigerian prince way, but in the marketing world. You see, every single guru swears that the only psychology that you need to understand is super surface level stuff like scarcity, urgency, social proof, blah, blah, blah. And don't get me wrong, those are important and they work. But your audience has seen them 1,000 times. And because of that, they're numb to it. They're clicking unsubscribe faster than you can type limited time offer. So what if I told you there are a couple of psychological triggers that almost nobody in content or email marketing ever talks about that are so powerful and overlooked that it makes your emails addictive, it makes your content unskippable, and it just makes people buy and frenzy your offer like crazy. And I'm not talking about fluff theory as well. These are real psychological principles that are backed by research, studies, all of the shebang. So over the next 20 minutes, I'm going to break down these 5 psychological principles and how you can apply them in your content, your emails, and your business so you can make more money. So, and by the way, the 5th one is literally the most powerful one. So stick around for that. Let's get right into it. But before we get right into the source, let's quickly just break down who this video is for and who it's not for so we don't waste anyone's time. So this is for you if you're a high-ticket coach, mentor, info seller, community owner, and maybe if you're an agency owner, if you have a single service agency, if you are making more than 10 grand a month, if you have client results, if you're open to new perspectives, and also if you have an email list and you post content regularly. If that's you, then this video will probably be quite useful. This is not for you if you're under 10 grand a month, no client results, not open to new perspectives, you're not any of those guys, or you just don't upload content regularly and you don't have an email list. If that is you, then click off the video because this will just be a waste of your time. But now we're talking to the right people. Why should you even listen to me in the first place? So this is some of the results that we've got with our clients, mainly through email. Here we have 30K pipeline 7 days, 5K pipeline day 1, 10.5K pipeline 10 days, 10K pipeline 7 days. And then some of the metrics through email: 95% open rate, 76%, 70%, 89%, 76% open rates. Then click rates: 19%, 41%, 22%, 28%, 8%. So there's plenty of proof. You can check out my Instagram if you want to see more. But without further ado, let's get right into the source and break down the first principle, which is the curiosity gap closure loop. Now, this is probably one of the most powerful loops, and many of you are probably already using this without even realizing it, but it's so important because this is one of the most fundamental, advanced psychological triggers, all right? And by the way, when I talk about curiosity gap, this isn't some kind of clickbait hack, okay? I'm talking about hardwired psychology. It's the Zeigarnik effect, okay? Basically, the human brain hates unfinished business. Just think about it. You probably can't remember what you had for lunch last Tuesday, but you might be able to remember that one girl that left you on red a couple months ago. Even though it was way longer ago than last Tuesday, you still remember about the girl, but you don't remember about your lunch. That's what's called the Zeigarnik effect, okay? Open loops get stuck in your brain, kind of like popcorn gets stuck between your teeth, all right? Now, what most marketers do wrong, or what most coaches and most info sellers, what they do wrong is they give everything in the email and in the piece of content itself. They give all of the value. They pile in all the value. They stack all of the proof. They explain all of the story. And then they wonder why nobody takes the next step. And let me save you some pain. Your job in your content, in your emails, isn't just to teach. It is to teach, but it isn't just to teach. But there should also be an element of tease. You should be teasing what comes next. Imagine if Netflix drops an episode of like Stranger Things. Imagine if they drop an episode of Stranger Things and they wrap up every storyline and they wrap up the entire storyline in 10 minutes with no cliffhangers, with no dangling threads, no what's going to happen next. You wouldn't watch the next episode. You'd close your laptop and move on with your life because your brain has got the answer that it's been searching for. Emails, content is no different. You have to create that gap. An itch, a curiosity itch, and then dangle the resolution out in front of them as the solution. Let me show you an example of how this plays out. Let's say your subject line is something like the 7-word phrase that almost tanked my business overnight. Now, pause there. What happens in your brain when you read that? The 7-word phrase that almost tanked my business overnight. You probably want to know the phrase, right? You might be building some guesses. Is it something dumb? Is it something rude? Is it something stupid? Is it something the client didn't like? That's opening the loop. That's what initially opens that gap that needs to be closed. And then you go into the body. I was on a sales call. My palms were sweating. Client staring at me like I just insulted his mother. And then, without even realizing, I dropped this one line, and you could see the deal die right there. Here's the key. You don't reveal the line now. You've built up all of that tension. This is what you do now. I break down exactly what I said, why it cost me thousands, and how you can avoid it right here. And then you drop the link. That's how you get crazy click rates. 41% click rates. There are very, very few people in this industry that can say that they got 41% click rates. So that's it in action, right? They can't leave it alone until they get closure. So just think back to your last email that flopped. Chances is, if you're not getting clicks, if people are not taking the next step, that you're just closing the loop too early. You know, if you're giving people the answer, the punchline inside of the inbox or inside of your YouTube video, inside of your Instagram reel, then nobody's going to take the next step because their brain got the answer. It's kind of like handing someone popcorn as they leave the cinema. It's useless because they've already left. So if you really want to print, then the more loops that you open, quite simply, the more clicks you get. The more loops that you're able to open and maintain, the more clicks you'll get, the more people will move on to the next step. Now, each click isn't just a metric, and this is really important to say. Each click isn't just a metric, but it's someone that's leaning forward, giving you permission to sell, showing you interest. And if you can get a stranger to care about half-told story in your inbox or on YouTube, then selling the actual offer becomes 10 times easier. Now, before you go, you probably already think about clicking off the video. Let me warn you, curiosity without payoff backfires. If you open the loop and then never close it, then people will feel cheated. So you have to close the loop. Otherwise, your credibility gets tanked. People just see you as a clickbait guy, all right? So it's kind of like juggling fire. It's dangerous if you mess it up, but spectacular when you get it right. And speaking of spectacular, see that transition there? Speaking of spectacular, let's talk about principle 2, called narrative transportation. Because once you've got them curious, the next move is to drag them into a story that's so deep that sales resistance, melts away in their brain. So let me show you. So now that we've opened the loop, okay, we've got their interest, we've got their curiosity. What happens after you get the click? What happens after you get the interest? How do you keep someone reading instead of skimming? That's where narrative transportation comes in. And it's essentially, very, very simply, it's fancy phrase, simple concept, hooking people with story. Because when people get pulled into a story, their critical thinking takes a nap. It's kind of like your brain shuts off when you get pulled into a really, really good story. You know, let me ask you, have you ever maybe binged a show at like 3 a.m. and it feels like time just disappeared out of nowhere, all right? That's what's called narrative transportation. Your brain gets sucked into a story so deeply that time, hunger, your to-do list, everything goes out the window. Now, email marketers or people who upload content who do not get this principle, they are boring. They are boring. They're saying stuff like, there are 5 ways to improve your sales calls. It's a snooze fest. It's information. It's not transformation. Nobody gets transported with your 5 sleep hacks. But look what happens when you eject story now. I was sweating bullets on Zoom, clients glaring at me like I just stole his wallet. My notes were useless. My throat was dry. And then out of nowhere, one sentence popped into my head. I said it, and the whole call flipped in my favor. Notice what just happened? Now, you weren't thinking, oh, this is a marketing email, or this is a marketing YouTube video. You were in the room with me. You felt the tension. You wanted to know the line. That's the power of story. It moves people from logic to emotion. And this is the sneaky part. When people are inside a story, they don't argue with you. They don't stop mid-sentence and have some objection like they need to think about it, because they're on the emotional current that you've built, which means that by the time you pivot into your offer, their guard is already down. Their sales resistance is already down. And lowering someone's sales resistance in your marketing in 2025 is one of the most important things that you have to understand how to do. And the beauty of this, and I'm maybe going a little bit of a tangent here, but the beauty of this is it doesn't have to be some kind of massive, dramatic story like I climbed Mount Everest barefoot. Sometimes even a micro story, a quirky anecdote is enough to pull people in. For example, saying something like, this morning I almost spilled my coffee over my $10,000 setup. And in that second of panic, I realized. You're transported. It's a micro story, but you want to know what happened. And so now when you tie it back to the offer, it doesn't feel like selling, it feels like sharing. Stories are sticky, but people forget facts. They forget bullet points, but they retell stories. They'll remember what you told them, not because it's educational, but because it was entertaining. And the more that they remember, the more that they remember, the more you're going to stay top of mind, and the more likely they are to take the next step. So the next time that you're tempted to stand up some dry tip list to your email list, to your audience on YouTube, Instagram, whatever, ask yourself, how can I transform this into some kind of story? How can I add more context, more meaning, more entertainment behind it? Can I set up a scene? Can I build some tension? Or can I just let the reader experience the lesson instead of just reading it? Because once you master this, selling doesn't feel like selling anymore. It feels like storytelling, and people pay to live inside a good story. Now, this is where it gets even juicier. You've opened the loops, you've pulled them into a story, but what about action? How do you get someone not just to read, but to act right now instead of putting it off? That's where the third principle comes in: temporal discounting reverse. And most people get this dead wrong. So listen up. So, we've opened the loops, pulled people into stories. Now let's talk about the biggest sales killer in marketing, which is the future. The deal is, us humans are like toddlers when it comes to getting results, especially people on the internet, the normal people who you're going to be selling to. Zero patience. They want the cookie now, not in 6 months, not in a year, now. That's what's called temporal discounting, which is basically just a fancy way of saying the further away a reward feels, the less that I care. Think about the gym, okay? Most people would say, or most people who are fit will say, work out for 6 months and you'll have abs. But in a fat person's mind, they'll think 6 months? 6 months of me not eating anything of the stuff that I want to eat, 6 whole months? That's what goes on in their mind. Future me can deal with that. I'm going to order pizza now. That's what they think. But then imagine if you just say, do one workout today and you'll feel stronger tonight. You'll look in the mirror, you'll see your shoulders are pumped. That's proof that you're on the right track. If you frame it like that, if you frame it as more of a short-term result, as an immediate win rather than a long-term result, then people are more likely to take action because people want the cookie now. Now, let's apply this to, and this is the example, that's the example we just talked about. Work out consistently, do one workout today. Long term, short term. If you want to apply this to email marketing or your content or whatever, most offers are pitched as a long-term transformation. They say things like double your revenue this year, get in the best shape of your life in 90 days, completely change your habits forever. And it sounds nice, but it's, number one, really, really overused, especially the phrase 90 days. It's really, really overused. People are numb to it. Instead, what if your emails, what if your content was reframed in a way as a reward seemed something instant, something that they can taste today? Instead of saying in 6 months you'll have a thriving coaching business, say something like, this week you'll sign your first client. By Friday you'll have proof you can do this. And from there, we stack win on top of win on top of win. The shift is, one feels like homework 6 months down the line. The other feels like a quick dopamine hit, which no one can resist in today's day and age. So if you layer this principle with the first two, open the curiosity gap, pull them into a story, and then close by promising a tiny immediate reward, not the whole cake, just a bite, then that bite is enough to start to get them moving. Now, you're probably wondering from what I've talked about is, why do quick wins work so well? Why frame it as quick wins does it whatsoever? And that's simply because the brain anchors momentum. When people act once and they see a result, no matter how small, they're likely to act again. It's like compound interest, but for behavior. So people who ignore this, they're selling 6 months futures to a brain who barely focuses for 6 minutes. They're selling, let me say that again. They're selling 6 month futures for a brain that barely focuses for 6 minutes, which is going to be a lot of the people who you're selling to, by the way. Okay? So if you want your emails and your content to actually get people to act, then you have to reverse temporal discounting. You have to translate the faraway benefit to a right now payoff. Because people won't buy 6 months from now, they buy today. And if you don't have a reason to get people to act today, then they won't act at all. So now we've covered the curiosity, the stories, the instant gratification. But here's the twist, okay? Even if you master all of that, there's still one psychological lever that multiplies everything, making readers feel like that your offer was like custom built for them. And that is principle 4, idiosyncratic fit. This basically makes people feel like, yep, this is for me. It's called idiosyncratic fit. People take action faster when they believe something is uniquely tailored for them, even if it's the exact same offer as that everyone else is getting. Messaging. This is what this is all about. Messaging, having good, specific messaging. And let me prove it to you, all right? Let's say you're walking down the street, okay, and you're hungry. It's the morning, it's 8 a.m., looking for something to eat, all right? You see 2 sandwich shops. One sandwich says, today's special sandwich and coffee, $5, all right? Pretty standard, pretty basic. The second one says, hey, coaches, today's special sandwich and coffee, $5. Say the same thing. The only difference is the second one calls someone out specifically. Now, as a coach yourself, which one do you feel more drawn to? Probably the second one. Why? Because it feels like it was written for you. Now, that's the principle in action. And in fact, as I'm talking about it, let's map it onto email marketing and content. Most email pieces of content feel like they're talking to a list. Generic, one size fits all, written for some faceless blob of subscribers. But the moment you shift the voice to one person, the moment the reader or the viewer feels seen, the conversion rate changes. Example, generic messaging. Here are 5 mistakes entrepreneurs make when emailing their list. Personalized, specific, being in the room with the other person. If you've ever opened your Gmail, stared at a blank screen and thought, what the hell do I even send today? This is for you. See the difference? You're kind of like that old high school maths teacher that nobody liked, all right? You're on the stage lecturing. And the second one, you're sitting beside them. You're giving personal guidance. You're kind of like their own personal guide, leader, okay? And when people feel that, then their defenses drop because it feels relevant to them. But where does the money come in? Where does the money come in? Once people feel like an offer is custom built for them, then they'll stop comparing. Then they'll stop having price objections because their brain will think that this is specifically made for them, even if it was the exact same email that went out to 10,000 people. And by the way, just as a side note, if you're wondering, how do I even do that? How do I be relevant to my audience? How do I know that this is what they feel? And if you're seriously asking yourself that as a coach making more than 10 grand a month, then that's your exact problem. Because you need to know your audience. You need to know pains, fears, desires. You need to know your audience so well. So really, this kind of stuff shouldn't really be too hard because you should have a really, really good understanding of your audience. But now that we've broken down those 4, here's the final one and where it really gets a bit wild. Because, when people feel like their emails for them, they start interacting, replying, whatever, clicking, they've crossed the line. Okay, they're no longer passive readers. They've invested, and when someone invests a little bit, even a little bit, it becomes almost impossible to not follow through. Now that is principle 5. It's the glue that makes everything else stick together. Ego, investment, bias. Okay, you've got curiosity working for you. You're pulling in people with stories. You're flipping that I want it now switch with temporal discounting reverse, and now your emails, your content feel like it's handcrafted for them. But this is the last one, and it's probably one of the ways and one of the big reasons subscribers turn into buyers and then stick around for the long term. And it's called ego investment bias. Once someone invests anything, even a tiny bit, they feel obliged to invest more. And anything means time, effort, or money. Okay? Example, day one, you might send an email that says, hit reply and tell me your niche. Then on day two, you send back, here's a free sample or a free template that you can use in your niche. It's simple, low barrier. A bunch of people will reply to day one. And now that they're invested, they put time and money, time and energy into you, then they're more likely to continue doing that. Then on day two, you send them more free stuff. So now it feels like you've got something that's built for them, especially if you're able to tailor this resource to what they said, what they said their niche was. Then you've created so much connection in that relationship that their brain will resist walking away from you because it feels so personal to them. Especially when it comes to this replying part, if someone participates, if someone takes action on something that you've told them to do, then that shows real interest. And interest and consistency is the recipe to cash. This is kind of a whole nother psychological principle, but there's a principle called consistency bias that say that people want to stay aligned with past actions. Okay, translation is once they've engaged once, they're far more likely to engage again and again and again and eventually buy. Okay, this is why email or content isn't just about writing clever words. Content isn't just about saying clever words, but it's about structuring experiences. It's about structuring your videos, structuring your ideas, your messages in a way to get your list, to get your audience to invest tiny actions, a reply, a vote, a quick challenge, a signing up for this, a signing up for that. You're no longer shouting into the void, okay? But you're in conversation with them. You're building a connection. And through connection, you're getting customers. Not just clicks, but real customers, real investors, okay? So here is the big picture. Curiosity pulls them in. The stories transport them. The immediate wins push them to act now. The idiosyncratic fit makes it feel personal to them, makes it feel relevant to them. And then the ego investment bias locks them in. When you stack all 5 of these, you're not just going to be writing emails, you're not just going to be creating, recording content, but you're creating psychological fly traps, okay? And when people step inside, it's almost impossible for them to leave without buying because you're working with the human